fellow beekeepers, Aaron King, your treasurer here to talk to you about feeding your bees. Fall is just around the corner, so if you haven't done it already, it's a good time to inspect your hives. This is going to help you develop your plan for the winter. You need to check your bee stores as well as the health of your colony. Going into October, you're going to need about 60 pounds of honey on your hive, but don't panic if you don't have any. I'm going to tell you some things that you can do to take care of. If they're close to that 60 pounds, great. They're probably going to pick that up during this fall nectar flow. However, if they're really depleted, you may want to start feeding your hives now, and we're going to talk about what to do for that. So typically in the fall, we would feed a 2-to-1 ratio. What does fall mean though? Does that mean when the leaves fall? Does that mean when it gets cold? Does that mean the fall equinox? Well, I'm actually going to tell you it means the fall equinox. So September 22nd, mark that in your calendars. Why the fall equinox? Well, the reason why we turn our ratio from 1-to-1 to 2-to-1 is because there's shorter days and the bees will be foraging less and less. So when you hit that equinox, your nights are going to be longer, your days are going to be shorter. So it's good to remember that's when you're going to switch over to your 2-to-1 feed. That's going to give them a more concentrated feeding over a shorter period of time in which they have to gather it. The great thing about winters in Virginia is that you can feed your bees pretty much every month. There are always going to be warm days. I would also recommend that you feed less more often. So don't give them a week's worth in one day. The cooler temperatures tend to crystallize your syrup mixture. And if your syrup mixture crystallizes, it's going to be harder for the bees to get to. So go ahead and just start feeding them smaller amounts more often. So a day's worth each day. If it crystallizes, it's going to be a lot easier to clean up than, let's say, a week's worth that's crystallized to your top feeder. So 2-to-1 is a really easy ratio to remember, especially because you can do it by weight or by volume. So either measure will work. If you do it by weight, make sure you do the other by weight. If you do one by volume, make sure you do the other by volume. So for every 1 part water that you use twice as much sugar. Now you can dissolve this 2 different ways. One is using cold water or room temperature water and agitating it, okay? What's good about that is you don't break down your sugar as far as the sucrose molecule. But what's bad about that is you can actually not dissolve all your sugar crystals, and if you leave a seed crystal in your water, in your syrup mixture, then more than likely what's going to happen is that seed crystal is going to grow and you're going to create more crystals. The other method is to actually heat up the syrup mixture or the water sugar mixture till it turns into a syrup. As you probably already know, it's very fast, but if you heat the mixture for too long or you boil it too hard, you can actually break down that sucrose molecule into fructose and glucose. And bees actually prefer sucrose to fructose, and they prefer fructose to glucose. Other than that, feed your bees normally when weather permits and the temperatures aren't too cold. So let's say you did everything right, because we're just going to say you did everything right. But for some reason your bees just depleted all their stores, okay? It's somewhere between February and March. You know that there's probably nothing that they can forage even if the days are warm, so how are you going to feed your bees? Well, we have emergency procedures for feeding bees. You can just use raw sugar and pour it on the very top of your frames, and they will dissolve that sugar if they want to by breathing onto it and then absorbing the sucrose that way. Another technique is fondant and candy board, which is what we're going to go over today in a demo. Both of these can be used to, and when I say candy board, I'm going to say a sugar candy board. There is a sugar candy board and a hard candy board. I'm not going to even do the hard candy board because apparently you got to boil it for a long time, and it gets really hot and it can be dangerous. So I'm going to kind of show you the 2 easier ones, which is the fondant and the sugar candy board, which is basically just crystallized sugar, kind of compact. Now I'm actually not going to do a candy board. I'm going to do a patty that you can put on top of your hive on the frames. but I will show you some pictures of how to actually do the actual board with the hole cut out. So fondant is basically a soft candy stage. It's kind of like you get your sugar crystals. I used to be a chef, so I'm just going to kind of explain like this. You're going to get your sugar crystals to a certain size by boiling it to a certain temperature, and your water to sugar ratio will dictate that temperature. And then what you're going to do is beat a bunch of air into it. We're going to actually use a mixer, but if you don't have a stand mixer, you can fold it, okay? That's how they used to do it back in the day, how they made taffy and all kinds of other things. But anyway, we're just gonna use a mixer. We're gonna incorporate some air into it, and then the bees are gonna be able to break down that. And because there's actually some moisture in it, I think it's easier for the bees to break down. We're also gonna do the candy board or the candy patties today, which is basically just a compact sugar cake that the bees can get to on the top of the frames. Now, I would like to say that if you do this only for emergencies. This should not be regular supplementing your bees. And if you're doing an emergency measure, you should never base it on a calendar. Make sure that you are doing it to the hive's needs. So just because someone says you should put that on you should put that on December 22nd. If your bees are in dire need, December 21st, you should go ahead and put it on, okay? And if your bees don't need it, don't go ahead and don't put it on until they need it, because it's just going to actually be in the way, and it could attract pests and other animals as well. So it's just best to do it that way. As you probably know, we sometimes have 80 degrees in February and snow in April. So the calendar won't really work. You will probably need them in February and March if you're going to use them, but don't be surprised if you have to use them in April. Okay, so the first item on our list is fondant. I'm just going to quickly go over the recipe. It's going to be 1 quart of water to 10 pounds of sugar and 1 tablespoon, is it tablespoon or teaspoon? 1 tablespoon of vinegar. All right, let's start the fondant. First thing we're going to need is a pan. Okay, since I'm doing a smaller batch, I'm just going to use a small saucepan, but you can use a larger one if you're doing 10 pounds. You will need a metal spoon, and I do recommend a metal spoon as opposed to a wooden spoon. And the reason why is wooden spoons can help to crystallize your sugar the wrong way. They have jagged edges and they can kind of seed your crystals. So I tend to use metal for this because it's smoother. It's a smoother, rounder surface. You're also going to need a candy thermometer, and some of you are going to say, hey, wait, that's not a candy thermometer. This thermometer works for me, but just check your temperature ranges. This can go up to 400 degrees, so it's perfectly suitable for doing candy. It doesn't have the nice little clip, but I can just simply put it through a whisk like this, and it will hold it. So I'm cheap, so that's how I'm going to do it. All right, the other thing you're going to need is a sheet pan. I have mine covered in tin foil just to protect it, as well as parchment paper, which you're going to need. What we're going to do now is get our fondant made. So we're going to go ahead and get a saucepan. We're going to light it up just like so, but we're going to bring that temperature down to kind of a medium. We don't want to burn our sugar. Let's go ahead and add our water like so. Our 12.8 ounces. And then our 4 pounds of sugar. Alright, the mess is cleaned up. Get the sugar off the edge here. Turn that heat back on. We're going to go back to medium because we don't want to overdo it. And we're going to just stir our mixture with our metal spoon. Now, this stuff is thick, okay? So, just kind of slowly turn it. You don't need to make it super dry. Super wet. just enough so that it's not going to be stuck on the bottom and burning. So if it can move, it's fine. The heat's going to take care of the rest for you. All right. Also, be careful if you spill sugar, because it can kind of burn onto your surfaces. So that's why I cleaned it up, that mess earlier. That's why I am cleaning up again. Okay. All right. So one thing I'm going to say is make sure your spoon is nice and long. This stuff's going to get hot. It's going to get to about 230 degrees or so. So we just want to be extra careful. Also, I recommend having a spoon holder nearby so that you can go ahead and put your spoon holder in. Okay. We're also going to add that vinegar. It's about a tablespoon, but I'm just going to eye it. Don't recommend that if you don't know what you're doing. Okay, as you can see, the mixture is moving around a lot better, which is good. You can probably smell that vinegar. All right, and then something ended up in there. That probably came from the spoon over here, so we won't worry about that too much. All right. This is the boring part, so we're probably going to fast forward. The physics behind this is really simple. Okay, the way you actually what you're really creating is a water to sugar ratio that is triggered by temperature, and what that means is water will only boil at 112 degrees. Okay, unless there's certain conditions like pressure, etc. So what that means is in a regular sea level, 112 degrees, water is going to boil. Okay, boiling water cannot get hotter than 112 degrees. Okay, so for it to get hotter than 112 degrees, it is going to have to get rid of some of the water, and the sugar is going to have to heat up, which can heat up in excess of 112 degrees. Okay, so you see this right here? We're getting very close. So I'm going to turn the temperature down. This nice light bubble, which is what you're seeing. We're going to go ahead and check the temperature real quick, see where we're at. Okay, we are at 120 and we are at 135 degrees. So now we're going to keep it low and we're going to check that temperature every so often. So we are at that stage. Did you notice how it just started bubbling up and it all went clear and you have all these kind of small bubbles? This is exactly where you want to get it. Okay, so the temperature is actually kind of approaching the 138 range. So that probably means that I'm good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to pour my mixture into this mixture over here. So I'm going to go ahead and be careful when you do this. Slowly pour it in. This is really hot. Okay. And now I'm going to wait. That's right. I got to wait for this to get to 180 degrees. So go ahead and keep it in here. This metal is going to help transfer the heat. And we will be back. So the temperature got down to 180 degrees. And what I've been doing is just beating this mixture. A couple of things that are going on. This is what's called the softball stage, or it was at the softball stage when it was boiling, which means that this is going to be soft and pliable. What we're doing now is we're incorporating air into the crystal structure so that it becomes even more pliable. So we're just going to keep beating this until it's very smooth and doughy, and then we'll be done. Okay, so as you can see, it's nice white liquid, kind of dripping, kind of like whipped cream, but if you feel it, it's going to have more of a crystal consistency because it is sugar we're dealing with. What we're going to do is we're going to dump this onto our parchment here, flatten it out, and let it cool. And that's pretty much that. Right, so just want to show you guys the fondant. It still has to cool a little bit, but it's almost ready to cut up. Sorry. That's pretty much it. Very soft, pliable, retains some moisture. You can cut it up into strips or however you want. You can fold it into patties and you can put on top of the hives. Depending on the height of your hive, it might be recommended that you put in a shim into your hive so that you'll have enough clearance to put this in. But that's pretty much it. Next thing I'm going to show you how to do is to do the quick candy board, or in this case we're going to do the kind of cake patties for the hive, because I'm just going to make small small batches. I typically don't use emergency feeding. I usually leave enough honey on my hives, but it's always good to know how to make these things. So the first thing I'm going to do, okay, and usually a recipe, and the recipe will be posted in the YouTube channel, but we're going to go ahead and put in 4 pounds, not 16 pounds of sugar, okay, and you would mix that 4 pounds to 3 cups of water. I mean that 16 pounds to 3 cups of water, but we're going to mix it up to 3/4 of a cup of water. And this is where it gets fun, okay. You can use a wooden spoon for this one, so I'm going to use a wooden spoon. You're going to kind of mix this around. Make sure you use a nice deep bowl so you're not pushing sugar all over the place. But basically, it's almost like you're trying to get the sand the sand consistency needed to make a sand castle. Okay. We also need to add our vinegar. In this case, it's going to be a lot less. Of course, I dropped the thing. It's pretty much just going to be a splash of vinegar for me. But I think it's a tablespoon of vinegar for the 16 pounds. So now we're just going to keep mixing all of this stuff up. Just keep mixing. You could also use your paddle attachment. Mine just so happens to be wet because of the fondant, so I'm going to hand mix it, okay? If you do 16 pounds, it's going to be a lot harder to mix, just to be honest with you, okay? But basically, you want to get that nice sandcastle sand texture. The other way that you can do this, though, is just to make little cakes. So I have a nice little form here. I'm just going to shove it all in there. Shove a little bit more in there. Okay. And this will sit right on top of the frames. Alright. So, just like that, I have my first cake. And then I would just build another one.
Hello everybody, my name is John Steffel. I'm here today on Labor Day 2020, right in the middle of the coronavirus and all the other good stuff going on. It's Monday, right at about 5 p.m. And we're going to talk about what you need to do to get your hives ready for the winter and some more general information. I've got my 47-page script here and I think we're good to go. First of all, tell you who I am or what I am. I've been keeping bees about 15 years. I am not a scientist, a chemist, or a researcher, or an expert. I just like bees, I like keeping bees, and I like doing it as simply and naturally as possible. Parentheses, frugal. Some people say cheap. If I can find something that's free or a couple of dollars, I'd much rather use that than a whiz-bang gadget that costs $25 you use 2 times and throw away. If you're a member of Tidewater Beekeepers Association, you know where we are. If you're seeing this video from anywhere else in the world or out of the world if you want to be, let me tell you what we've got here, because keeping bees is specific to your region. We are in southeastern Virginia. basically 14, make sure I got this right, 16 miles due east of me is the Atlantic Ocean. 16 miles due north is Chesapeake Bay. 14 miles southwest is the Great Dismal Swamp and Lake Drummond. And if you don't know what that is, when you look on a big map and you see that green area right in the southeast corner of Virginia, and there's a big round dot right in the middle of it, that's Lake Drummond. Straight south is the North Carolina line that's less than 11 miles away. So that's about where we are. Surrounded by water, low-lying land, swamp, lots of mosquitoes. But we don't have a lot of hills and valleys. And as someone has put it, we have the worst climate to raise bees in, but the highest demand for local honey because of the allergies. You know, supply and demand. So that's where we are. So, number one, if you're looking at something on the internet, make sure you know where the information's coming from. If Billy Bob is talking to you from North Wisconsin, what he's saying may not apply to you in South Dakota or Kansas or anywhere else. So pay attention to that. Excuse me while I check my notes here. The bees don't care what the area is called, but you need to know what's going on in your area. Know your weather. In this particular region, winters can be really goofy. Sometimes we have no snow. Sometimes we have 14, 15 inches of snow. Not a lot to some of you folks, but around here there aren't that many road scrapers. And the bees need to fly. We've had winters where the bees will be out flying in January and February. Not a whole lot, but they'll be flying. So what you need to do for your bees is important to keep them alive. All right, first caveat of any beekeeper training. What happens when you line up 5 experienced, knowledgeable beekeepers and ask them all one question, the same question? Answer is, you get 8 to 10 answers. Which one's the right answer? All of them. Which one's the wrong answer? Maybe none of them. But you gotta take it apart and listen to it, because what matters is what you do with your bees, not what Fred's doing with his bees or Mary Lou's doing with her bees. They're your bees. You're responsible for them. Do what you think you need to do. And the second caveat is do what you think is right, but also don't keep swapping back and forth. Don't watch somebody this week and say, "Ooh, I think I'll do that," and then next week you watch another video. "Oh, I think I'll do that," because from my knowledge and experience and what I see, that stresses the heck out of your bees, because they don't know what's going on and things keep changing. Just like if you move into an apartment, great apartment, and then you move to another apartment 2 weeks later, and then you move to another apartment 3 weeks later. One, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and 3, things are changing drastically and the stress level is way up here. My opinion, same thing with the bees. So let's get into winter preparation. You see beside me here a 3/4 inch thick wooden stock nuke. Now, some people pronounce that a nook. Around here we call it a nuke. Whatever. It's fernuculus because it's designed to hold, these are designed to hold 5 frames to give you the start for a hive in the spring, or for multiplication or adding to your apiary. When you have 8 or 10 frame boxes that come through the spring and summer, and you've taken the honey off of it, or if you left all the honey on there, you've got a stack of boxes, and some of that real estate inside there may not be in use. The bees have probably moved up in the box. Let's use a queen excluder. And you might go in to do an inspection and the whole bottom box is nothing but empty honeycomb. You need to reduce the size of the area the bees have to keep warm for the winter time. That might mean taking 4 boxes down to 3 or 4 boxes down to 2. sometimes all the way down to one. It's better to have at least 2 boxes so they have a little bit of room to move and to get to where they need to be. So think of it this way. If you have a 27-room mansion and money gets tight, if you're smart, you're probably going to start closing off part of that mansion and not heating or cooling the parts you're not using. Same thing with this. These bees have to keep the inside of this box as close to their desired temperature as possible. They can't do that when there's 4 or 5 empty boxes. Add to that the fact that other critters can move into the box and set up housekeeping. Mice, bugs, anything. So we'll get to entrance reducers here in a minute. But what you want to do is take it down to a reasonable number of boxes. Leave honey on the hive. We'll get into that here in a minute too. Questions have been asked of when you should start reducing the boxes. Well, right now it's September. It's 83 degrees, and I'm sitting here in a short sleeve shirt and sweating. Bees are still flying. Some things are still producing. The general consensus in this area, unless I miss it, is right around October, late September, early October, as soon as the leaves start changing colors. To reduce a hive down, you're going to be going all the way through it, or should be, to clean it out and get it ready to go. That means you got to have it all the way open, which means it has to be warm enough for the bees to fly, to get enough propolis and other material in there to reseal the inside of the hive. So late September, early October, it's a good time in this area. Over winter, the bees need capped honey, probably some pollen, and they're going to need some water. Where do they get the water? Well, they might bring some in. They may produce it themselves. They produce a lot of moisture in the hive themselves. But they need all of those things. And around here, again, it's on my list. We'll get to it. Ventilation. Very, very important. Now, entrance reducers. This is the entrance, obviously. This is where the bees go in, back and forth. Again, this is a 5-frame nuke, and it's got a full open entrance. Now, you can go out and buy a fancy doodad whiz-bang gadget, several of them actually, that you twist or turn or slide to change the type of the entrances. In this instance, it's an open area. Now, I've got some wooden entrance reducers that are cut down to fit in there, but I've recently made a cool discovery. If you find a kitchen countertop company or sink making people or whatever, they throw out a lot of scraps. This is your handy dandy leftover scrap of granite, real granite, stone. Won't rot, won't discolor. The bees can't move it. And hey, look at there. It reduces that entrance down by about half. Or you can, do it this way or that way, or break them in half, and you can get this down as small as you want it. Oh, and these are multi-purpose. You can use them on 8-frame, 10-frame, 7-frame, 5-frame, whatever. They work great. I've just started using these last year, I believe, and have found them to be very, very effective. So in the wooden entrance reducers you guys might have, ones that this long I was going to grab one, but mine are either in use or in storage somewhere. They have different notches on them. Be careful which way you turn it. One way you can totally close them in, one way gives them about that much space, and one way gives them about that much space. Be conscious of that. In some regions, you have to be careful which one you use because the dead bees pile up inside there. Is a problem. Around here, we don't have that much issue because literally our bees can fly 12 months out of the year. Not the whole month, but a few days. So you want to close it down. Your goal is to make the entrance small enough so that they don't have to have a lot of bees down there guarding the front door. And hopefully where a mouse or other critter can't get in the hive to cause problems. Because they're looking for a nice warm place to spend the winter too. And hey, look here. There's a nice box. It's heated. It's got stuff to eat. All that good stuff right there in one box. Great place for a mouse. You don't want mice. Wind breaks. Well, again, this is where you got to know your region. Where do most of your storms come from? Which direction do the winds come from? Around here, it's usually assumed that to the north is where all the cold winds come from. My personal experience is we get a lot worse winds from the west in the wintertime than from the north. Northwest, to me, is the best area that I concentrate on. A windbreak is just that. It's something to keep the wind from cooling down your hive. And it can be any number of things. Here at the TBA bee yard, we have a member that owns the property here, and I'm looking behind the camera at a stack of straw bales. They make an excellent windbreak. Stack them up along behind your hives, or you can even make a U shape around your hives. Plywood, fences, like a more solid fence, not a chain link fence. That doesn't stop any wind, obviously. Or, honestly, I lucked up and found a glass tabletop made out of that. It's the type of tempered glass that won't break very easily. And when it comes time to make a windbreak, I just stand it up, lean it against a tree, and I have an automatic windbreak right behind the majority of my hives. Plywood. Saw something on a YouTube channel. The guy had cut some trees down, all about 4-6 inches, and alternated them, stacking them up, and made basically a wooden wall behind his hives. Pretty cool. I can't do that in my yard because I don't have any trees to cut down. Evergreens are another wonderful windbreak. If you have enough space to where you can plant evergreens behind your hive or to ring around your hives, again, a fence. Some of our folks have a lot of property, and some of them have been lucky enough or been able to actually build a fence specifically to shield their hives. Works great. Rebars, 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch metal rods driven in the ground with Tyvek, which is that basically waterproof or water resistant and air resistant material they make the space suits out of and wrap houses in. Go to construction sites, they might have some laying around they're throwing out. But you can wrap it or between the rebars to make anything, an area to deflect the wind from your hives. Because you don't want, they got to keep these warm inside, and the less wind along the outside, the easier it is for the bees to keep it warm. How much honey do the bees need? There are lots of programs, algorithms, math, chemistry, practical applications, etc. I leave as much on the hives as possible. I take what I need for my family, maybe a few friends. I'm not in the honey making business. I grow bees, I sell bees, and when I have enough honey, I sell honey. But I'm not in the bee business to sell honey. If you're out there to make honey, that's a little different subject. But you need to be careful not to kill your workforce. The general, I'll say normal weight that people throw out there is 60 pounds per hive. How do you tell that? Well, they'll sell you a scale to put under your hive to weight it for you. Or some people, remember this is just a nuke, but on a full 8 or 10 frame hive, you can go down behind it and lift it like this. You can see I'm moving that really easily. If it's got honey in it, it's a whole lot heavier. And that comes with experience, just being able to figure out how much honey is in there, how much weight is there. Wrapping your hive. That's one of those things that you'll see from northern Michigan, North Dakota, upstate New York, several other places. I've done it a couple times in Virginia here, experimenting with it. Each time it's been, in my opinion, a dismal failure. What it refers to is wrapping your hive with some sort of insulating wrap, whether it's Tyvek or actual insulation or one of those commercially purchased slip over the top black colored body bags that go on your hives. The problems I had with them is, number one, our bees tend to fly almost 12 months a year. Number two, they trap in a lot of the moisture. The cold usually doesn't kill the bees. It's the moisture that gets on the bees that kills them. So you want the moisture to get out of the hive, not hold it in. Plus, one year I was really diligent. I wrapped them up really good. And when I opened them up in the springtime, I had mold all over the outside of my hive. I don't see the benefits of it for this area. Wintering nukes specifically, a nuke is 5 frames. That's what we define it as. 5 frames. That's not a lot of space, but it can be done. But it's much better if you have 2 boxes, usually, because then you have a bigger space for a cluster of bees. We'll get into that here in a minute. You have a bigger space for food. You have a bigger space for them to hang out when they do get around and move inside the hive. These happen to be 3/4 inch wood. That refers to the thickness of the wood here. If you go online, you can get plans to build plywood nukes. One particular plan, you can build 4 deep frame, 5 frame nukes out of 1 sheet of plywood. So you get a sheet of 1/2 inch plywood, what is it, $20 now? And you get 4 nukes out of it. I'm still using some nukes that I built, big grief, 6, 7 years ago. They look nasty, but they work. But they're 1/2 inch plywood. This is 3/4 inch solid wood. My wife, she says she's not a beekeeper, and she says they're not her bees, but she insists that if I overwinter any bees in a nuke, that I put them in a 3/4 inch box, because it's got to be warmer than the plywood. Men, just do what your wife tells you to, and don't worry about it. Cost for these are less. They're easier to move. As you can see here, I can put 2 boxes on there and a lid, and you fill it up with bees and honey and all the other good stuff, and you've still got a load that one person can move pretty easily. Try that with an 8 frame, and it's going to be really interesting. Do it with a 10 frame, it's going to be even more interesting. Usually takes 2 people or equipment of some type. So if you've got to move your hives for any reason, nukes are a lot easier to function with. Pros and cons. Nuke is a smaller space for the bees to have to heat and protect. It's easier for the beekeeper to move it if they need to. And in a smaller box, it can lead to earlier spring buildup. In other words, if they have a little bit of extra room, they'll start filling it up with pollen, and the queen will be laying her eggs in there as quickly as possible. Cons, it's a smaller space to store the honey and the food they need. It's easier for the storms, or windstorms, we have a lot of them around here, to move these for you. These are much less stable than an 8 frame or a 10 frame. And if you forget about a nuke, you don't get out there and work it early enough in the spring, these babies will swarm on you a lot earlier than an 8 or a 10 frame. Just keep that in mind. Bottom boards. Okay. Remember what I told you about ventilation and humidity? Well, in our region, this is what's recommended. It's a screen bottom board. You can see right through it. Most of the junk falls right through it. Now this one's used, you can tell. Sometimes folks from up north, you talk about a screen bottom board and they start having a conniption fit. Because, oh my gosh, it'll kill the bees, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, it might up there, but around here, you need a screen bottom board. Why do you need a screen bottom board? Ventilation. And all the gunk falls through. Okay? Keeps it a lot cleaner inside. Now, this one is set up, I don't know if you can see that, there's a groove on each side so that you can put in your sticky board. So you can spray it down, put it in there, and catch the mite fall that comes out of the bottom and count them. Don't assume that you need to put that in there for the wintertime. Because if you do, it creates a area down in here under the screening, between the screen and the sticky board or cardboard or whatever you put under there, that the bees probably can't get to clean it. So what do you get? You get piles of debris, pieces of wax, pieces of bees, mites, small hive beetles, honey, moisture, heat, and all that adds up into a moldy, stinky mess. The bees don't like it, you don't like it, it smells bad. Not good for the bees or you. So that's all you need. This is it. Wintertime, right there. And oh my gosh, the wind goes under there and they'll all freeze to death. No, they won't. As long as you give them space to where they can move up a little bit, the wind will go under it, and they're fine. The next thing is you need ventilation, some way for the moisture that they create to come out. The different vendors online and everything will sell you all kinds of stuff, shims and doodads and gadgets to raise up the cover just a little bit to let it vent. However, this one I have not done it to. I apologize. If you take go by the big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, whatever, get some of their paint stirrers or yardsticks or scrap wood, or if you want to, cut your own. Basically 1/8 inch thick, cut little squares and glue one in each corner. That'll raise it up just a little bit to let the moisture come out of the hive and out away from the bees. Oh, I also forgot, on the entrance reducing, if you have a top entrance, that counts as an entrance. So you have to reduce it. Ideally, usually in the winter, you want to close the top entrance. You just need ventilation. You don't want the bees coming and going through the top. Unless you live in the snow belt and you need an elevated entrance because of the snow. Cluster mechanics. Well, a cluster is beekeeping words for a big ball of bees. What they do in the wintertime, when it's cold, is they will cluster together and make basically a ball inside the hive. And they get as close together as possible, up to and including going into the honeycomb cells. So there's bees in the comb, there's bees on the outside of the comb, there's bees on the outside of the bees, and there's more bees in the next comb over. And it's a solid ball of bees that just happens to have honeycomb in the middle of it. Their purpose is to keep the center of that, and again, I'm not the scientist, I don't remember specific temperatures, I think it's like 82 or 83 degrees, something like that they keep the middle of that ball. And there's one particular bee in that cluster that's more important than all the rest, the queen. They'll keep that queen right at a comfortable 82 degrees, while the rest of them are working to keep it warm. And they do that by vibrating. Now think about this, when you get cold, really cold, you'll start shivering and you'll start rubbing your hands together, rubbing yourself to stay warm. Bees do the same thing, except they just vibrate. They vibrate very quickly. And it's a big ball vibrating all through it. The ones on the outside get cold, get tired. And if they're healthy enough, they'll merge and go into the ball, and another set will come to the outside and take over. And they keep that up. That's a cluster. What they'll do, usually, is start down in the lower section and move up as the winter gets worse. And if you have your hive set where the sun can hit one side or the other, they'll actually move to that side so that they get the heat of the sun as well as the cluster. And I'll tell you the trick on that here in a few minutes. When it's really cold and the bees are clustered up, they won't even move to eat. Dead clusters have been found very close to honey, but they were so intent on keeping it warm inside that they wouldn't go that, less than an inch away to get the honey to stay alive. Nature. It's interesting. There are circumstances where a cluster doesn't work for the bees. You got to remember, they're doing all this for their benefit, not yours. If there is brood, if the queen is laying brood, all the nurse bees shift their priorities to protecting the brood, and they will do everything they can to keep the brood warm. So you might have 2 frames of brood, and for whatever reason the queen's over here, off to one side. So unless there are a lot of bees that can cluster around all of that, they have to split their priorities. So again, sometimes you can't, they don't get the memos on all this stuff. They don't read the books. They don't have YouTube to watch. They just go by nature. So, sometimes you got to scratch your head and say, whatever, The point is, they will do everything they can to stay warm. If you give them the option for them to stay dry, they'll usually take care of the warm part. Can you inspect it? Yes, you can inspect, but how you inspect and what you inspect is the critical part. As I heard somebody say, and it made so much sense, don't ever go into a hive just to go into a hive. Have a purpose. Why are you going into the hive? And is it reasonable to do what you think you're going to do? Well, it's February. It's a warm day. I'm bored. I'm going to go tear my hive down to the bottom board just to see what's there. Not a good idea. For several reasons. You don't want to disturb them in the cold. You ever watch TV and you got these weather guys on TV that say it's 20 or 30% chance of rain or snow or whatever? Yeah, they're educated and they know a lot of stuff. These girls, they know, okay? If they know there's a storm coming, they don't want their house ripped apart. They will not be happy with you. I don't care how much you talk to them, they won't be happy. Also, if you don't know, bees use a substance called propolis to seal up their hive. If you've got bees and you've ever tried to use your hive tool to pop apart a box and you're sitting there and you're about to break your box because they've got it glued up, that's propolis. That's an antimicrobial lining. It's also like caulk on your house. You know, it's wintertime. You want somebody to come in your house and take your roof off and go, yeah, everybody's still there. And then put the box back down. Oh, golly, look, there's cracks all in there. That's air, water, leaks. Well, let's line it up. Okay, we lined it up, but we still got to seal it. So, can you inspect? Sure. Is it the best thing to do? Not necessarily. Why are you inspecting? What are you inspecting? If you want to see, are the bees really alive? Well, I got a secret for you. Put it back in my pocket. This is a Cat S60 cell phone. Less than a regular iPhone. Does pretty much everything an iPhone does, except it's not Apple. And it has a little doodad on it that is a legitimate real live FLIR, infrared camera. Now you can buy attachments for your other cameras, or you can just use this, and it does your infrared on what you're looking for. Now what the heck is that for with the beehive? Remember how I told you the cluster will start down here and maybe move up or move side to side? With an infrared, with the temperature difference, you can see that. you can walk up to your hive in cold weather and turn that baby on, and you can see the cluster inside the hive, as long as the temperature difference is enough. It even works in daylight. Nighttime's better because it's obviously cooler. I've gone out, I'm sorry, I had to switch phones out, but I've gone out in 30-degree weather and inspected my hives to see, are they alive? Yeah, look at there. There's a spot in there that's 80 degrees. Golly gee whiz. They got the memo. It's great. Don't have a fancy camera? Oh, you're out of luck and the whole world's going to end. So, no, it's, you can watch the entrance for activity. You can if this is a hive, it's wintertime, and you want to, and it's midday. You got to do this earlier in the day so they have enough time to reseal it before it gets cold at night. But you can pop the top off and look down in there. Look down in there. And you can see, okay, there's my cluster, and they still got 2 frames of honey to go. Good to go. And no mice right out the front. We're okay. Do you want to pop the frames out and look at them? Probably not the best of ideas. There's a thing called chill brood. It is just what it says. The brood gets chilly and it dies. That's not a good thing, unless you just want to kill bees. Then you don't need to be watching this video. Another way to inspect your hive, which can be interpreted as learning something about what's going on inside the hive, is, remember how I showed you to check and see how much honey they had left earlier in the season? Well, you can do that in the wintertime too. That doesn't disturb the bees that much, because if you go out and do that with your hive, let's say November, and you got to use both hands to raise it up, yeah, you probably got a lot of good honey. Then you go out there in February, be careful. Don't use the same amount of force, because you might flip the whole hive over, because they've eaten a lot of that honey. They use it. So weigh it. Think about it. Now here's another thing. While you're working your bees during the regular season, try to get familiar with how much a box of honey weighs, and a box of brood weighs, or get used to that weight so you can guesstimate how much is in there. Another non-intrusive inspection. When should you inspect? If they're flying, you should be okay to inspect, as long as it's not late in the day. Again, you want to give them time to reseal everything before it gets cold that night. Again, we're weird here. I have heard bees stop flying at 60 degrees. I've heard bees stop flying at 45 degrees. I've heard bees don't fly in the rain. I've heard bees go into cluster and won't fly at 42.3 degrees or something. All kinds of different specific temperatures. I've gotten swarms in the rain. I've seen bees flying when it was 31 degrees. Were a lot of bees flying? No. Was it the best choice for the bees to be out flying? I don't think so, but I'm not a bee. Point is, try not to get into the hives when it's cold. If you're cold, they're cold. They can't put on long johns or a coat or anything else. They have to make their heat. So plan accordingly. Okay? I'm not going to give you a specific temperature because I don't know if there is one. They're all different. Another way to inspect the hive, you in there? They'll answer you. They will. I've gone out in the dead of winter, popped out my camera. Okay, I see the image, but I like a little verification. Okay, they're in there. The colder it is, the slower they are to get to a buzz, but you can hear them. Again, non-intrusive, doesn't break any seals, but they're alive. When do most hives starve? Oddly enough, early spring. Why? Well, think about it. They're going into the winter. They've got their winter stores. They kind of know how much they need. That silly beekeeper might have come along and stolen a bunch of it, but they might have enough left over. Okay. So they're good for the winter. Then it starts getting warmer, and maybe that silly beekeeper comes back and throws some syrup on them to get them ready to get going and get the queen ready and revved up to start laying eggs. And there's a warm spell, and it's like, whoo, let's go. And they go out and they go to get whatever. You know, we're going to go forage for pollen, nectar, you know, find a queen that's ripe, anything, you know, we're going to go out. And then the next day it's 21 degrees. And then there's a 4-day stretch of 20-degree weather. That happens here. It's during those times when they start eating up their stores, building up, ready to go. We're going to go. This is our spring. We're going to make it. This is going to be great. And then we can't leave because it's too cold. But they've already eaten everything. That's the worst time. That's when you need to be very conscious of the food level inside your hive. Don't kill them that way.